Okay, hello there everyone, and welcome to our University Business Web Seminar today. It's great to have you all with us. My name is Kurt Isidurley. I'm the magazine's web seminar editor, and I'll be your moderator. The title of our event, as you see here, is Driving Student Success with Predictive Analytics, and is being brought to you free of charge through the generous support of our sponsor for today, Jenzabar. First, as people are still coming in, I'll start with a bit of a background about our topic for today. Predictive modeling seeks to answer the question of why students persist by discovering hidden relationships in data. By leveraging a clear picture of past and present behavior, predictive modeling uses statistical analysis to generate a confident simulation of future behavior. Institutions can then use that insight to positively impact student trajectories and influence outcomes. Today we'll be learning how to drive student success with predictive analytics from an administrator at Crown College in Minnesota, who will share the predictive model they have developed to identify at-risk students, as well as describe the communication flow and intervention process that leverage the information discovered from the model. We're looking forward to a very interesting presentation and discussion, as well as live Q&A here, so do stay tuned. We're going to get started in just a minute or two. But before we do, just some quick housekeeping here for you, just in case you're having any trouble listening through your computer speakers, or if you prefer to listen over the telephone, you may have noticed we just posted the phone number and access code in the chat panel that you should see at the middle right margin of your screen there. You can dial those numbers to get audio access over the phone if you need it. If you don't see that chat panel, you may have to click the chat icon all the way up at the top right there, and also click the arrow to the left of the panel name as you see on the slide here. Speaking of that chat panel, you can use that to send a message to our host and producer. Her name is Ashley Morgan. If you just choose her name there, if you're having any technical problems, she'll help you out there. If you have a question for our speakers, please, we welcome your questions at any time here. Feel free to use the Q&A panel that you should see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. Just make sure it's set to all panelists. That's the default option. Again, feel free to ask a question at any time as we're going here. We'll answer as many as possible when we get to the Q&A at the end. So once again, if you do have a question, feel free to enter it in that Q&A box, the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. Also, we'll make the slide deck available if you want to download it, review it at your own pace, or share it with your colleagues. And the archive recording of our presentation here will also be available if you want to review or share it with your colleagues. But I'll tell you more about that a little bit later on. So with that, on to our program here. Today we're fortunate to have with us Patty Pitts. She is Director of Academic Programs at Crown College in Minnesota. Also with us is Megan Turjanica. She is Product Manager of Student Success Solutions at Jenzabar. Megan is going to start us off here with an introduction to our topic. And so with that, I'll turn it over to her. Megan, it's great to have you with us here today. Welcome to today's web seminar.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, everybody. Like Kurt says, I'm Megan Turjanica. I am the Product Manager for Student Success Solutions at Jenzabar. And today we're here to talk to you, as Kurt introduced, the idea of predictive modeling for student success and what that means. And we're very pleased to be able to have Patty, she is one of our clients, talk about what they've been able to do at Crown College to make a big difference in their student success efforts on their campus. So here's an agenda for today. Really briefly, I'm going to go over what we're talking about when we're talking about predictive success, predictive modeling and predictive analytics, because that definition seems to vary all over the place. So we're going to talk about what we're referencing in this presentation. And then I'm going to hand it over to Crown, to Patty, and let her talk about their student success philosophy and strategy, Crown's particular predictive model, how they've been able to leverage the data, the results and outcomes they have, and then their future plans. In the end, we'll wrap it up with some pointers on how to start small, make an impact, and grow your efforts, and then we'll finish with a question and answer session. Right. So predictive modeling for student success, what are we talking about here? One thing that's really important is that when we're speaking of predictive analytics and predictive modeling at Jenzabar, we are talking about custom predictive models. So that means for every client that we work with, we look at their data, so your data particularly, and don't try to assign data to groups or categories. Don't try and say this algorithm is going to be predictive for every institution. It's really important to us. We say that you have incredibly rich data, and some of it's very specific to your institution, and sometimes the results we get out of these models can be very, very surprising. At some institutions, disciplinary factors end up being a positive for whether or not students stay or go. So there are always these little nuggets that are so specific to an institution that probably wouldn't necessarily make a model that was built off a general algorithm. We also are really intentional and targeted in when we are creating these models. We pay attention to cohort size. So that means that we're looking for a group on your campus when we're going to model for student success purposes. We're looking for a group that is large enough to have an impact, but not so large that you won't have the resources to address that information that you've gained. Because this is all about not just telling you who's going to be at risk. That's great. That's wonderful information, but making sure that you have the boots on the ground, that you have the feet ready to move and support those students. And then also the type of cohort, paying attention to, is it really important for you to focus on your first-year students? Well, potentially for your institution, it's much more important to look at your adult ed or some other cohort of students, and that's where you really ought to start. It's important to note that we don't just do one model. That's just where most institutions start, is with one. But it's really important that when we're creating these models and working with you on that process, that we have a very narrow focus in making sure that you get kind of the biggest bang out of your efforts. Then what's about the process of predictive analytics, predictive modeling? What do we do? Well, when we're developing predictive models with you, we look at data. And institutions are all over the place in where they are in understanding risk for their students at their institutions. We have some institutions that have already started to build their own models. And we have other institutions that only really have anecdotal stories about why students are at risk. And so we work with this wide variety. And what we do is we look for correlations initially between, okay, what factors on your campus end up correlating with the desired outcome of retention or progression or what have you. And from there, once we know those most predictive factors, we put them together and we do a logistic regression. And what's really neat about logistic regression, it's much more than just a, being a first-generation student correlates with retention or departure. It actually looks at the interplay of all the factors so that the sum of all the factors ends up being much greater than the whole. So the individual parts themselves are predictive, but when we put them all together, you get a much stronger prediction out of them. From this logistical regression model, what we find out is a retention score for each of the students, and that's from 0 to 100, 0 being not retained, 100 being retained. Now that information in and of itself is really useful, but it's hard to take that information and understand what to do with it. So we help you break those groups down into thresholds so you're able to work with those individual groups. And we have 3 thresholds, and Patty's going to talk about all this, so I wanted to set the stage for it. We have the quote-unquote safe category, the green, and then we also have the at-risk and high-risk categories. And the idea is that by creating these different categories, these thresholds for risk, you're then able to identify students who you are going to be able to work with in a proactive manner, which is the entire point of what we're doing. We're trying to give you information that then you can take action on. You create a communication plan for, just like Patty's going to talk about with what they've done, and you really see some positive impact in your student success on your campus. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Patty. There you go, Patty.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. I appreciate it. Yes, my name is Patty. I am the Director of Academic Programs on our campus, so I do a lot of initiatives that come out of the academic office, academic affairs area, and one of those areas is retention. Just a teeny bit about Crown College. We're located just west of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis area. We're a 4-year private college of about 1,300 students. We have about 40 accredited majors were accredited by the HLC, and we have really put some intentionality into retention, and we're thrilled with the relationship that we've been able to build with Jenzabar. So with that, we'll get going. Kind of our background, how did we get to where we started using predictive, and we'll actually even talk about reactive modeling as well. But a number of years ago, I want to say it was about 2009, it might have been right around that time, our President's Council identified that our retention rates just really weren't where we wanted them to be. And no one really at that time owned retention. It was kind of everyone's responsibility, but no one really took ownership of it. And so the President's Council said retention really needs to lie in academics. And so my direct report, my supervisor, took on retention and started putting some intentionality into what retention looks like for Crown College. A retention committee was formed. We actually created a partnership, or we sought out a consultant that we worked with, and we felt like it was very expensive and a lot of money with, we didn't totally see the benefit of that. But we did put some intentionality into thinking about retention. We created an early alert system that actually was pretty much hated by our faculty. They felt like they would submit an alert and no one would really know about it, and so they kind of got to the point, well, why submit this, because nobody responds to it, and so they kind of quit using it. We didn't know that we thought we were, but we weren't sure we were targeting the right students. We really didn't have the ability to analyze the data to actually say, are the efforts that we're putting into this model, or this, we didn't call it a model at that time, an early alert system, was it actually working? We really didn't have any ability to do that. So in 2013, I was brought into the picture, and I really was charged with putting even more intentionality into what retention was going to look like and what those efforts were going to look like for Crown College. And we started our partnership then with talking with Jenzabar about their modeling system. And we did a pretty extensive research of a number of vendors and landed with Jenzabar for a number of reasons, but one was the assistance that we were going to get with the whole setup and the ongoing support. We liked their early alert system. We liked the predictive and reactive modeling that we got out of the system. So, and then the other reason, real strong reason, was that we're part of HLC, and we applied to the Persistence and Completion Academy through the HLC, and were actually accepted in April last year. We applied in April, got accepted in the summer, and began kind of our first-year journey with the Persistence and Completion Academy with the HLC. Our partnership with Jenzabar fed right into that, and we were able to use all of the data that we worked with our consultant last summer to really put some intentionality into what we were going to do with retention on our campus. So we felt like that was a great partnership for us. So we worked with Jenzabar consultant last summer, spring and summer. They actually came to campus in April, and then we worked with them all summer to create a freshman retention model. That's actually what we call it. We call it our freshman retention model. We did the model on our freshman cohort. So that's the cohort we decided that we were going to put intentionality in, because our retention of our freshmen fall to fall is our lowest group. And so I think it is across most campuses, but that was where we wanted to really make sure that we were putting intentionality into. So all summer we collected data. That was a process, but it was actually a good process. Our consultant worked with us hands-on, and we were really able to feel like we had some good data to look at. We actually were able to get 6 years of data, and we determined that we have 9 factors that make a student at risk for Crown College. And as Megan said when she introduced the presentation, these really are unique to Crown College. I'm sure that there are many of these that are common among campuses, but we really looked at what made a student at risk at Crown. And these are students, obviously, that are not on campus yet. So this is our freshman cohort. They aren't here yet. And so some of those things were gender. Our females obviously retained at a higher rate than our males. Unmet need. Our students with a high need did not retain as well as those with not a high need. Distance from home. This was actually interesting. Our students really close to our campus. I don't know the boundaries off the top of my head, but I do know that the students who lived within a really close distance to the campus actually retained less than students who were in a 100 to 300 mile range. So, and then also our students who lived a long distance from home retained at a lower rate. The fourth one is department. This was an interesting one, and that was our students in our Bible and Theology and Ministry Studies department retained at a much, I won't say much higher, but at a higher rate than any other department on our campus. And that probably goes along with the mission of our college, and that's a strong focus, and so that's the type of student that we probably attract and retain at a higher rate. Our FAFSA date. So students that submitted their FAFSA a lot later tend to retain at a lower rate. High school type, private, public, and homeschool. Deposit date, you know, the later they deposited, the higher the chance that they weren't going to retain. High school GPA, and then ethnicity. So all those wrapped together, as Megan said, did give us a retention rate for each of those students in that freshman model. And as Megan said, they're in 3 categories. They're in the high-risk category, or the at-risk category, the high-risk category, and the safe. And what was really kind of a aha moment for us, I guess, was in August. I think I remember it was like between the 15th and the start of the school semester when we were thinking, okay, we're going to roll this out to our freshmen. Our consultant ran a model verification on our freshman cohort from 2014. So he actually ran the data that we had collected for our fall 15 cohort and ran it against our fall 14. And he identified that there were 33% of our students that fell into that high-risk category. The alarming was 100% of those students were not back. They did not come back for the fall of 2015. So we felt like our data gave us some really rich information that if we could somehow intervene on behalf of these high-risk students, we potentially could retain some of them. So that was our strategy. So our retention rates are higher than the national average for 4-year private schools, but they're certainly not where we want them to be. And we, as I said, this really came out of an initiative from the President's Council, now President's Cabinet. And so some of the things that we did is we created a persistence and completion team, persistence being, you know, retention, and completion being graduation. A team that was really focused, includes our athletic director, the director of our study lab, student development, our enrollment director, myself. So it's a faculty member. So it's a rich group of people across the entire campus that are going to put some intentionality into, are we putting the strategies together to really target these at-risk and high-risk students. We did some really intentional training with our faculty and staff across all of our, across our entire campus. I was able to spend an entire morning, so 3 or 4 hours with our faculty, talking about retention, talking about the value of predictive and reactive modeling, training them how to actually use the system, helping them wrap their minds around the value of submitting alerts and following up on alerts. And we really wanted them to know that they had a resource. They had a quick way that they could notify us if a student seemed to be in trouble. so that we could intervene and hopefully keep the student on campus. So kind of our tagline was that we, and this goes along all with our mission statement and kind of how we named our Jenzabar product, but we basically want to provide the tools and support for our students so that they can run the race, persist, and finish the course or complete their program of study and graduate. Or for those students who are here for 2 years, get an AA degree. So again, they're basically a reactive model and a predictive model. And Megan talked a little bit about the predictive. I want to just talk a minute about the reactive model because this was a huge part of our work with Jenzabar as well. But basically what we laid the expectation that we expected our faculty and staff to submit alerts. We told them we wanted them to notice students, engage with students, and submit alerts on students. And what I kept saying over and over in the training, and I have throughout the entire semester, is that if we do nothing different than what we have done in the past, we will retain at the same rate we've been retaining for the past 10 years. But we have to stop and we have to do something different than what we've done in the past. And the reactive model and the predictive model that we've been able to work with Jenzabar on has given us the tools to be able to do that. So again, we challenged people to notice students, to engage with students, and then submit alerts. And we gave them 4 A's. We said submit alerts on assignments. So if a student is missing a number of assignments in a row or throughout the semester where now it's becoming a problem and it's starting to drastically or negatively affect their grade, submit an alert. We said submit an alert for attendance. We basically put the guideline that if a student has missed more than 1 week of class unanswered for no reason, submit an alert. Assessment. We asked our professors to submit alerts on any student when their assessment in the class is dropping. If they were an A student and they're dropping into the C range. If they're a B student and now they're down in the D and F range, or any student that drops down in the D and F range. For our nursing and teacher ed courses, maybe it's even the C range because their standards, they have to have a C or higher for the course to count towards their major. So assessment. And the fourth one is attitude. And this was basically a change in a student. So if a student was real bubbly and outgoing in the beginning of the semester, and now they're just flat and they're not engaged, they're coming to class, but they are really not there, that's a change, and somebody should know about it. So talk to the student, but submit an alert on them as well to get somebody else involved. So our alerts for the fall, we were really pleased with. They were great. We had over 1,000 alerts submitted, and if you remember, we're a fairly small campus. So people were submitting alerts on lots of different things. And of those 1,000 alerts, we had over 850 of them resolved. What that means is 850 of them, somebody intervened and somehow it was taken care of. Whether it was a conversation with a student and the student got back on track, or a conversation with a student and the student said they were going to get back on track, somehow the alert was addressed by somebody with the student and it was resolved. Of those 1,000 alerts, about 700 of them were submitted by staff. So that includes me as a retention coordinator. I kind of fall between faculty and staff in some roles, but coaches, mentors, our student development staff, something going on, our billing office, our chaplain's office, those 700. And then we had almost 200 of them submitted by our faculty. So that means 200 issues with students that maybe wouldn't have ever been told before that somebody was able to intervene on behalf of the student. So then the next, as Megan talked about, is the predictive model. And this was, we took that 6 years of data and we ran it against our freshman cohort, and we identified that we had 7% of our students in the high-risk category. So students who, if we didn't do anything, aren't going to come back. And then we had 31% in the at-risk category, So this is their rate was high, but not extremely high. And then we had 61% of students that were safe. So what did we do with those high risk, at risk, and safe students? Basically, we, at the beginning of the year, I sent out an alert on every single student that was high risk and at risk. And I sent it out, number one, to their advisor, and I asked their advisor to follow up with them and have a connection with them within the first 3 weeks of the semester. Certainly, they were not going to have a conversation such as, I understand you're at high risk at the college, and so I want to talk to you about that. We wouldn't do that. But what they would do is say, you know, I'm your advisor, and I want to make sure I have the opportunity to meet you so that if you have any problems, you know where I am and you know who you can connect with. So it is an early and ongoing connection with a student that potentially could be at risk for leaving your institution, our institution. We encourage I also copied, if I knew, if a student had a mentor, 3 weeks into the semester, they usually don't. So we also sent it to all the coaches. So if a student was an athlete, I sent the high alert and at-risk alert to the coaches and asked the coaches, or informed the coaches that they were an at-risk or high-risk student, and made sure the coaches put a little more intentionality into connecting with those students, because a lot of times those are freshmen that maybe don't know the head coach as well as the upperclassmen. We also, for our international students, we involved the person that connects with them on campus to make sure she knew that those students were identified as at risk and high risk. We encouraged the advisors, the mentors, the coaches, and the international advisor, the RDs, to meet with the students on a regular basis and develop a relationship with these students. Because if they can develop a relationship with them, the chance of keeping him here increases. I also shared the high risk and at risk students' names, which are very easy to find in the system, with the department chairs, and encouraged the department chairs to engage those students some way in the department. So if they had a department meeting, to make sure that those high-risk and at-risk students maybe got their own invitation, or a number of things. And that is something that we're going to continue to improve upon in this next year. We certainly did not do everything right. So the other thing that we did was we identify transitional students, and we provide transitional student assistance. These are students that are identified throughout the whole enrollment process. So we actually have started to identify them for the fall of 16, you know, already in January, February, March, and now in April. And these are students that may fall a little bit below our entrance requirements, but we feel like they, with some assistance, would be able to persist. Well, we identified transitional students last year and ran them, of those transitional students that were part of the freshman cohort and modeled by the Jenzabar process, they were identified at high risk and at risk. So we were actually really excited about that, because we said these are definitely students that according to our model are at risk, and according to our admission standards are at risk. And we put some real intentionality into intentional advising, pre-semester meetings, setting an academic plan with them, weekly meetings with the director of our study lab, encouraged or required them not to take more than 15 credits in the semester, minimal co-curricular involvement. We certainly wanted them involved, but not over-involved. We wanted them involved in their athletic, you know, if they were on an athletic team, we didn't want to take that away from them, but not overly involved. And then we required them to have a study lab requirement, which is really a tutoring center. We had success with them in the fall. We had a number of them that actually moved out of transitional status. Those were at-risk and high-risk students that we felt really were doing well enough that they didn't need that weekly monitoring, but we did feel like we needed a little more intentionality with them weekly. So I've actually started meeting with them instead of the director of the study lab, and I do have weekly meetings with them as a group, and it's really a kind of a cohort mentality of, we really want you here in the fall. What can we do to help you come back in the fall? So it's been great to work with these kids, and yet frustrating when one of them decides not to come back. So, so historically, our data from fall semester to spring semester, historically we retain about 91% of our students. That wasn't high enough for us. This past fall to spring, it actually went up to 94%. So we feel like, wow, some of our intentionality is working. I think Jenzabar alert system, the reactive and the predictive modeling have been a key factor in our retention rates going up. Certainly we have to continue to analyze data. We cannot say that our retention rates are going up off of one semester worth of data. We will continue to analyze that. But we have been intentional about putting focus into reactive and predictive modeling. And someone just asked, what do you use for faculty? In fact, faculty to submit alerts, it's the Jenzabar retention, the reactive modeling. That is where our faculty can submit these alerts. So it's a great system. We provide students with the support and tools they need to succeed, or we hope we do. So the next slide is really going to kind of show our, let me see, did I do that right? Yeah. The next slide is going to show our kind of where our students fell. So 58% of our student body, our entire student body, not just our freshman cohort, received at least one alert. And we feel really good about that. I feel really good about that because our students are getting noticed, people are interacting with them, and people are getting others involved in things that students might be challenged with. When we looked at our students that came back for the spring, 70% of our at-risk students retained. If you contrast that to our at-risk students from the fall of 14, 100% of them left. So 70% of them retained is a huge improvement. Our high-risk students was lower. It was only 54% of those students retained. Still a good number, but not high enough. And then 85% of our safe students retained. Some reflections on that is we sent a higher number of alerts on our at-risk students. Is that why 70% of them retained and only 54% of our at-risk students retained? I don't think one semester of data confirms that, but it certainly begs the question. Did we retain these students at a higher rate because of the alerts that were sent out on them and the alerts that people were able to follow up on? So we'll continue to evaluate the strategies that we're putting into trying to keep our high alert students as well as not losing our at-risk students. So this slide and these numbers are probably what I'm most excited about, and that is that students who did not come back for the spring is not because we did not make an effort to keep them. Certainly, we're not going to keep all students on campus. Not everybody's a fit for Crown. We don't necessarily have all the majors that some students want. Students leave for various number of reasons, but 93% of the students who did not come back received at least one alert. The average number of alerts that went out on students who didn't come back was 5.1. So 5 alerts on a student who didn't come back. What does that mean? That means we really put an effort in to students who did not return. Does it mean our efforts didn't pay off? I don't think so. Our retention did go up. Certainly, it's one semester of data. We'll continue to analyze it. But we identified the non-returners, and we tried to provide them with the tools and support they needed. So students didn't just walk out of I think I can confidently say that students did not just walk out of our institution without someone trying to intervene to help them. We didn't have a lot of surprises when I did the final analysis on the students that left. I was aware of most of the students and directly aware of why they left. And so I didn't feel like we, there were a lot of things that went unnoticed or went unaddressed. So yes, we will continue to analyze the data that we get out of Jenzabar. You get some really rich data on, how many alerts were closed, how many interventions were done, how many follow-ups were done, who closed their alerts, who didn't. I mean, you just get some really rich data that can really help you strengthen your processes. So we know we have to put some more intentionality into our high-risk students, not at the risk of losing our at-risk students. But we're talking about things like peer mentoring. So students that have been successful with the transition program, bringing them back in and having them mentor brand new students and help with that. Getting our RAs involved in the high-risk and at-risk students earlier in the semester. I think we need to improve there. We do require midterm advising, but make sure our high-risk and at-risk students are part of that midterm advising. Require the advisors to check in with them 1 or 2 times during the semester. I'm not sure we followed up on that as well as we could have. And then just hopefully work with departments to see how they can engage those risk students, because we know that we retained 85% of our safe students. It's our at-risk students that we lose. And I think our predictive modeling showed us the students that we lost or that are at risk. So we certainly have plans to reevaluate what we're doing for 16-17. Our persistent completion team will actually begin to meet again this spring and really put some intentionality into, do we need to make some changes for 16-17. But we've been very pleased with the partnership we have with Jenzabar and the ability to use the predictive and reactive modeling. So I'm going to turn it back to Megan.
All right, thanks, Patty. Let me see here. Yeah, that was great, and loved hearing the details of your program, of course. Very, very exciting. So just to wrap it up here, what's really interesting about the story that Patty tells about what they've been doing at Crown is where they started. You know, they did some work beforehand, and they had done some preliminary groundwork, and then they were looking for a solution to help them to the next level. So that's great. We were ready to help them there. We were ready to meet them where they were at and help them develop these models, these workflows and communication strategies, and really implement them. I also want to make it clear, though, that you don't have to have as much done as Crown did ahead of time. We have a lot of institutions that we start with that, like I said before, really only have anecdotal beliefs about what makes a student at risk. In fact, I used to actually work for a client institution, and my institution had a lot of anecdotes and not as much data yet when we implemented this product years ago. And it's a pretty common thing, but what you're able to do through this process that we work with you on is we're able to help you identify what factors are really predictive and work from there. In fact, we can help you with everything from the workflow. How do you work with students who are at risk, and communication plans, to building that model. There's a wide variety of ways that we can meet you where you're at and help you take it to the next level. One thing that I absolutely love about what they're doing at Crown, and something that we try and stress to all of our clients, is the importance of employing the cycle of assessment. So you can see that Patty has done a lot of work with not only, you know, working with students and trying to shore them up in a variety of different ways, but then she's also pulling that information on the back end and saying, okay, what worked, what didn't work? And there's that importance in the cycle of assessment of being able to just really dig into, okay, this is our goal. We're trying to retain students. What steps have we taken? How has it worked for these different categories of students? And they're going to turn around, and next year they're going to implement some more changes that are probably going to yield, even more positive results for them. And that's such an important and crucial thing to do with student success. Our most successful campuses always employ the cycle of assessment. I did really briefly just want to go over, we've done many, many predictive models. We recently did just a quick study of the models we've developed, and we always get this question, so I thought you might be curious about it. The question is, what are the most common factors? If you guys don't use an algorithm, if you don't have something done ahead of time, what do you often see as making it into these models? In recent years, we've seen financial be a bigger player. So we see a lot of unmet need being really important. Deposit date interval is one that's been coming, it's our actually third most common factor. But we also have, in that list of top 10 factors, 5 of them are all financial related, which is really interesting. That's playing such a major role, obviously, and that's something you even hear when you speak with different institutions, that they know that a big reason why their students are leaving is financial. So whether it's that the parents were denied a PLUS loan, or their EFC to merit need differential is too high, they just can't make it. There are a lot of financial reasons why people don't make it. Then there's also things like ethnic group, college major, high school GPA is still very predictive for a lot of campuses. Gender, just like you saw with Crown. And a surprising one that is a positive predictor on a lot of campuses is, of course, Greek life. It's not that surprising, but can be surprising. All right. Moving forward here, last slide. So I mentioned that we can meet you where you're at. And what am I talking about by that? Jenzabar Student Success Solutions has a host of products and services that are designed to really work with institutions wherever they might be in this process of seeing their students more successful. At one end of this beautiful rainbow we have right here, you see Jenzabar Retention Early Alerts. So that reactive modeling that Patty was talking about, that workflow process, that's a big part of what Jenzabar Retention Early Alert is. It's all about getting the right resources to the right student at the right time and then eliminating the grunt work. We also have the Jenzabar Student Success Survey, which is a non-cognitive survey element that's very brief, powerful, and efficient. And it's huge for helping you give tools to your advisors and different people on your campus so they're able to have really great conversations with students, whether they're entering students or students who've been around for a while. We have Jenzabar appointments to help you make it easy for your students to sign up for appointments with you. And then, of course, there is the full suite of Jenzabar retention that Crown has, and that doesn't include the predictive modeling as well as then those workflow components to help you make sure that your students have the right resources so that they're as successful as possible. Now, I've already seen that we've got some really great questions, so I'm going to hand it back to Kurt to moderate here, and hopefully we can get some good answers to them.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much, Megan, and thank you, Patty. Yes, we're going to get to your questions here. First, a couple of reminders. I know there was a lot of great ground covered there. We're getting some comments and questions here asking about accessing the slides as well as the archive recording. And just a quick reminder, everybody who registered here, yes, you will be getting follow-up email with links to where you can access the slides. And yes, this is being recorded. It will be archived on the UB site, and you'll be able to access that. You'll see that referenced in that email as well, so don't worry about that. Another reminder here, if you do have a question, please enter in the Q&A box there, not in the chat window, but in the Q&A, bottom right-hand corner there. And we're getting a whole lot of great questions here. We're going to try to answer as many as we can here. Let's see, first one I might go to you, Patty, with. Let's see, there's several related questions here about your different threshold points. Someone asks here, how are you determining the thresholds for risk in the logistic regression model? Are the generic cut points at 50%, 80%, 90%, et cetera, or are you using confidence intervals to create this separation? Does that make sense, Patty?
Oh, it does make sense, and Megan may have to jump in and help as well. When we built our model, obviously in August, We, I think we did just use a set one that Jenzabar identified as to who would be in the at-risk, high-risk, and safe. But we talked with our consultant at length about really identifying where those cutoff points were. And because we were just wrapping our mind around how to use the predictive analytics to influence retention on our campus, we went ahead and went with the cutoff points that our consultant suggested for us. As we analyze the data this summer, we may change that and may have different cutoff points. Does that answer your question? Did it make sense?
Okay, I think so. Megan, anything to add there?
Yeah, I was going to say that was beautiful. Generally speaking, we recommend one standard deviation above and below the mean for the cutoff points, but it is a consultative process, just like Patty said. So for some campus, they actually want to look at, okay, so how big of a high-risk category can we have if we're going to work with them in this specific way? So they might consider it in terms of resources and might set the thresholds based on that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you both. And related question or questions for you, Patty. There are several people who are asking about how you differentiate between high risk and at risk categories. Several people asking in different ways there. What's the cutoff? What's the difference between those groups? Could you touch on that again?
Well, and again, Megan can clarify because she actually talked about it in her introductory slide. But each student is given an actual score. So we identified 9 elements that make a student at risk at Crown College based on our 6 years of data. And those 9 factors all rolled together, and I think it's logistical regression, gives each student a score. And then those scores ranked from 0 to 100. And as Megan said, 0 is the student is, at risk for retention, for not coming back, and 100% is they're not at risk, they're going to come back. And then in that, we just identified which of those were at risk and which were high risk. Now, obviously, a student who's at, right at the line could jump over between high risk and at risk. Really the biggest thing is the score they have. Megan, did that kind of answer it?
Yeah, it's absolutely determined by the student score, and then you divide them into discrete categories by, those score groups. Yep.
Okay. Okay, great. Question here from somebody from a different kind of institution, it sounds like. So maybe go to Megan for this one. It says, I work with adult students that come in with various levels of college credit and life experience. Can cohorts and data be gathered for this group as well? So Megan, can you do this kind of thing with a different type of student population?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things about predictive analytics and doing it this way that's so important, is that adult education is a really great example where a cookie cutter model is probably not going to fit. Even when we go from campus to campus and we're meeting with different adult education programs, we see that there are lots of different ways of doing it, and even the student populations vary so greatly in preparedness, college course levels. So yeah, we would probably look at things like, okay, how much college coursework do they have? When was the last time they were enrolled in school? How many previous institutions do they have? There's all sorts of questions that would be different questions we'd work through with you on that. Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, Patty, I think you addressed this question during your presentation. Someone asked about how the alerts are sent out, and you talked about that being through the Jenzabar system. So somebody follows up here saying, how is the data then entered for those alerts? Is that entered into Jenzabar? How does that work?
Good question. I'm going to kind of do the the logistical piece of how an alert is submitted, and then I'm going to hand it over to Megan to kind of talk about the data piece. But basically, when we worked with our consultant and setting up our whole system, we got to speak into where we wanted someone to be able to submit an alert. And so we put literally submit an early alert button on our home page, not the home page that the internal home page. So when a faculty or staff member logs into our site, and ours is called Our Crown, when they log into Our Crown, this early alert button is right there. It's a triangle, it's a caution kind of symbol, and it says submit an early alert. They click on that, and it literally is a form of about 4 or 5 questions, very easy to use. They don't necessarily have to write anything if they don't want. They click the student's name, they click what the alert is about. We have a number of concern types, from academics to student development issues to, we just added an alert this spring that student is talking about not coming back to Crown. They click on the alert type, concern type. They choose from a drop-down menu of a number of reasons why they would submit that alert, and then they hit submit. We determine it based with the work that we did with our consultant. We determine who automatically gets that alert. So we automatically send any academic alert to our advisors, and that prevents me having to go into the system and then forward it to somebody and have there be a delay. So instantaneously, the advisor is notified the student is struggling academically. But there are other alerts that we don't send to anybody, and they come through the retention office to be read to determine who needs to see that. Because if it's an alert about a student behavior or something like that, we don't want it going to a broad audience. But I'm going to actually turn that over to Megan. And Megan, can you talk a little bit about how the data comes out of it?
Yeah.
I work with our IT person to pull it out, so I don't know that I necessarily have the knowledge there, but I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. So you did a good job of describing the basics, which is that those different fields on the form are what drives the intervention process for the campus. So based on concern type, and then also one of the things that we ask submitters to rank is severity. So based on concern type and severity, different people are set up to be notified about different concerns as they come through. So a really classic example of this is that, for instance, financial concerns may only go to a financial aid person to review. And then on the back end, we provide a reporting package so that you're able to dig into the details of, okay, what concern types are really are submitted more often, who is submitting them, what's the severity, and then also what's the outcome of all these alerts that have been submitted. So that information is all tracked so that you're able to turn around, take that information, and apply it to your business process the next year, saying, oh, we see a lot of this type of alert just about midterm. Let's ramp up our efforts around midterm, make sure we have more of a certain type of support person ready to deal with these particular issues.
Okay,
Excellent.
okay. Great. Thank you both. Let's see, another one for you, Patty. Just as, were there other changes to your entering cohort from 2014 to 2015, such as they may have had a higher GPA, were they less diverse, things like that? Do you know about perhaps other factors that played into? It seems like they're asking about the change in your retention rate.
Right. What I said during my presentation was that we developed a model. We ran it against our 2014 class, and none of those students were back in 2015. They were identified by the model as high risk, and they didn't come back. And I believe the person is asking, could there have been other factors as to why those students didn't come back? And certainly there could have been. And did we do the deep dive to determine if those students that were identified at higher risk have a lower GPA, and were they, yeah, did we do that deep dive? We did not. We did not. We decided at that point that we were going to move forward and try and leverage the model that we did build and see if we could put strategies around the students that were here. And we may do some of that analytics this summer, when our students aren't here, and we can actually take the time to do that and see if the model is working like we think it is.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Someone else asking about your retention numbers there. They say that your numbers are a bit confusing. You stated on that one of those slides there that you retain 94% of all students, but then you had another slide referencing 58, 70, and 85%.
Oh, yep.
Can you explain that? I think is that those are very specific groups, and the 94% is your overall. Is that right?
Correct. Our 94% is we had an eligible number of students that were able to return. So you take out the graduates and take out the students that may have been suspended or withdrew during the semester. So we had a list, eligible pool of students, and out of that eligible pool of students, 94% of them came back. But when I gave the numbers about 70%, 50, I think it was 54%, and 85%, that was just our freshman cohort that were modeled by Jenzabar's retention predictive analysis. So of those students that were modeled, 70% of the at-risk came back, and 50-some% of the high-risk students came back. So that was not the overall number. So does that clarify it?
Okay, yeah, I think so. All right, great. Let's see, another one asks you, does your analytics indicate which specific interventions were most effective at increasing probability of retention? Is that also part of it, Patty?
It will be. It unfortunately, you pull the data. I mean, we couldn't pull the data obviously until students came back for the spring, and then you're already hitting the ground running with trying to put interventions into the students that are here. So that is the deep dive that we want to do this summer, is to say what really worked at keeping these students here. And like I said, this is one semester of data. So for us to say this is perfect and it's working and everything we're doing is great, it is foolish. We will take a look. The other thing that is really nice about the system is that it tracks interventions. So you send out alert. You can track how many times people did something about that alert, and we'll do a deep dive into what were those interventions. What did people do with those students to help them? And we'll take the time this summer to do some of that analytic work. We just didn't have time to do it between semesters.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Patty, you mentioned a number of factors that you found are predictive of retention. Someone asked, what about work status? Do you find students' work status is predictive in any way?
Yes, we do. There are a number of factors that we determined, even with data, that make a student at risk once they're here. But remember, this model that we built, and you can build different models with Jenzabar, but the model that we built was based on our freshman cohort. So our students that were not yet on campus. So they didn't have jobs. They weren't attending chapel. They weren't involved on campus. So those factors didn't play into this model. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I think so. Great. You also mentioned intentional trainings. Someone asked here about that. Can you talk a bit more about those faculty and staff intentional trainings? How in-depth are they?
Yes. Like I said, I have the support of administration, academic administration, to really put some intentionality into retention. So we had, 2 or 3 hours with our faculty that we were able to take them in very small groups, 20 to 25 at a time, in the computer lab, literally talking about the reason that we want to do predictive and reactive modeling, the reason that we felt like the early alert system was worth their investment, the benefit that we thought they'd get out of it, and then just literally hands-on. How do you submit one? How do you follow up on one? How do you close one out? All the logistics that go in with the early alert system. and then I was able to train small groups of staff members around campus as well, because there wasn't a time to really pull the entire staff together. So we did small group trainings with the different departments of staff on campus, and we will continue to do it again in the fall. We'll do a refresher with the faculty, we'll do time with the new faculty, and then we'll be even more intentional with our staff. Hope that answered it.
Great. I think so. Thank you. We're at the top of the hour here, but maybe ask you one more here. Let's see. Patty, this person asks, when you share the at-risk lists with advisors or others, do you share the factors that contributed to students being on that list? For example, if it's financial needs or social fit, do you share that with advisors? Do you keep some of that information private, or do you let advisors and others know that information, Patty?
That is a great question, and actually was discussed and debated quite a bit by our persistence and completion team, and we did not share the factors with our advisors. I'm sorry, we did not share the factors with our department chairs or their advisors for the reason that we did not want them doing the analytics on it, because that is not really where we wanted them spending their time. We worked with the consultant, pulled out 6 years of data, believe that we have a model that right now is working. We certainly are going to have to analyze this model each year that we roll it out, and that's what our summer work is going to be. And we did not want our staff and faculty analyzing the factors and saying, well, you know, I'm not sure this person is as high a risk as you think they are, and that was really not where we wanted them spending their time. What we wanted them doing was building relationships, working with the students on things that will keep them coming back to the campus, not analyzing why they might be walking out the door. So I hope that helps, but it was definitely a conversation that we had on campus.
Okay, sure. Very, very interesting. Thank you so much. Well, we are out of time here, unfortunately. We're going to have to wrap it up here. On behalf of University Business, I'd like to thank our speakers once again, Patty and Megan. Thank you both so much for being with us and sharing your time and your expertise with us. And thank you again to our sponsor, Jenzabar, of course, for sponsoring our event today. And to everyone in our audience, thank you as well for joining us. I do hope you found our seminar informative and useful to you here. Producing events like this one is just part of our mission at UB to inform college and university leaders like you about news and trends in higher ed management. You'll find more coverage about issues such as the ones we discussed here in the pages of our print magazine, as well as on our website and in our free daily e-newsletter, UB Daily. And as I mentioned before, for those of you who would like to share this event with your colleagues, or if you want to go over the presentation again at your own pace, you can access it from our website by going to the URL on your screen here, where it will be posted in the archives section. And if you'd like to download the slides, you'll find instructions and a link in a thank you email that you'll receive later on today. So keep an eye out for that. So that is it for today's event. Once again, I'm Kurt Isley-Durley for University Business on behalf of our producer, Ashley Morgan, and everyone on my production team. Goodbye, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.